I'm a big fan of the NES Ninja Gaiden games. The first was an absolute classic, blending in solid yet challenging gameplay, in-your-face action, a groundbreaking storytelling presentation in the between-stage cinematic scenes, and some amazing music. To this day, I can still finish the original game, after a few continues that is, and for as difficult as Stage 6-2 is, once you clear it and the game itself, you feel like you've accomplished something. Then we take the sequel, which amps it up even further, with smoother gameplay, even better music, and an evened out challenge level. Add in the ability to be able to climb up and down walls instead of just jumping and clinging onto them, and you have the recipe for a phenomenal sequel that lives up to the Ninja Gaiden name. The third game? Well, I can't comment too much on it, because I haven't really played it yet. We'll get there eventually. What I'm trying to say is that the Ninja Gaiden games are some great games to own and play on the NES. Fast forward many, many years later, and we get the more modern Ninja Gaiden games. First released on the Xbox in 2004, there was then a remake called Black which, among other things, apparently upped the difficulty. But the version of the game that I'm playing this week, called Ninja Gaiden Sigma, takes Ninja Gaiden Black and ports it to the PS3, with only minor changes that I won't bother getting into here. Believe it or not, when I first bought my PS3, Ninja Gaiden Sigma was one of the very first games I bought for the system, after Condemned 2 and GTA 4. I played it for a while, enjoyed it, but moved on to other games that I purchased at the time. I've come back to Ninja Gaiden Sigma here and there every few years, but I always started over, got about 4 or 5 chapters in, and then moved on to something else. Can't tell you why, I'm not sure. But this time, I was determined to sit down and complete the game for a review. Did I succeed? Hell no! Just like the past Ninja Gaiden games on the NES, you play as young Ryu Hayabusa. The start of the game is almost like a training mission of sorts, in which he is battling through a mountainous path, striking down opposing ninjas on his way up to a room where he fights some guy with a nunchuck. After the battle concludes, you find out that this is an acquaintance of Ryu. So, did you just slay innocent people just because you could? I've always been a bit confused on whether the ninjas you fought in the trail and in the building are friendly or actually invading. Either way, Ryu talks to this man for a bit, and you learn a bit about the legend between the good and evil Dragon Blades. A female ninja named Ayane, who you might recognize from the Dead or Alive fighters, runs in and exclaims that the village is on fire. Ryu kills more ninjas who are clearly enemies, and eventually runs into a dark samurai named Doku, who happens to be some sort of evil deity or something. He is nearly killed, wakes up, and sets off for the town of Tyron to get some revenge. The story itself is somewhat interesting, although the presentation of it is done in standard for the era scenes. I don't know how you can really make these scenes more interesting like they did for the NES games, but it works I suppose. Thankfully they are skippable, so if you've seen the video before or simply want to skip it just because you don't care, then feel free. The game itself plays as the standard third-person action game. Ryu has a weak and a strong slash, performed by pressing the square or triangle buttons. He can jump, block, roll, and so on. Being a skilled ninja, he is also able to run off walls, performed by simply jumping towards a wall and moving with it. The game does have platforming segments that require you to do this, and you will want to get proficient with it. Enemies start off as being basic ninjas and sorcerers, but you will also quickly run into various types of clawed mutants that are trying to separate your head and body. And oddly enough, there are dinosaurs to fight. Because why not, I suppose? It does feel a bit out of place in a game like this. I mean, the original Ninja Gaiden games had strange enemies like eagles, spiders, and some various mutants, but I don't recall fighting a bony tyrannosaur or a flat-out fiery dragon. Closest thing that we got is maybe the final demon bosses. It definitely feels out of place, I must admit. As most other action games do, Ninja Gaiden Black allows you to find multiple different weapons and thrown projectiles. Personally, I mostly just use the Dragon Blade and the twin katanas as they seem the most effective, and never really bothered with anything else. The shurikens are nice since you have an infinite amount of them, but they don't do a heck of a lot of damage, and are more meant to keep enemies at bay until you can get a better swipe in at them. The bow is awkward to use, as pressing the circle button will fire off a shot, but if you hold down the circle button and move the left analog stick, you'll go into a first-person mode, where you can manually aim the shot. This is clunky because you might be running around a lot trying to evade attacks, just want to fire off a quick arrow, yet are stuck with going into this aiming mode and take damage because of it. You also have access to ninpo, which are essentially the secondary weapons you had in the original games, although really nerfed. In the NES games, you collected icons that increased your spiritual power, with most weapons using 5 or so points. In Ninja Gaiden Sigma, each use simply costs 1 torch in your gauge, and I've found 5 total points in my playthrough. In addition, casting ninpo isn't instantaneous. Instead, you press triangle and circle at the same time to charge your ninpo, and then release to fire at what feels like a random enemy. In addition, you can shake the PS3 controller to increase the ninpo's power, in what feels like a cheaply tacked on move, just to say that they're using the motion control aspect of the controller, like many early PS3 games did. It really doesn't feel necessary. Worse, a lot of times when I was attempting to use ninpo, especially against bosses, I felt like I was just stuck doing a heavy slash or a projectile, as if the game didn't realize I pressed both buttons at once. It gets frustrating. Speaking of frustrating, that sums up Ninja Gaiden Sigma. See this game over screen? You will be seeing it a lot, and there are multiple reasons for this. If you have little ears in the room or are sensitive to anger, you might want to stop the review right now because the rage is about to come out. I can honestly say that I haven't been this frustrated with the video game for a very long time. I've played a handful of Souls-likes, and not even those games got me as angry as Ninja Gaiden Sigma did. Why? Let's start with the camera. That's right, a PS3 game with camera issues. You would think that we'd be over this by now. We are a few generations from the N64 and PS1, console games that were the starting points for 3D games. Yeah, the camera in some of those games were wonky, and not even Super Mario 64, a game that did a great job with the camera controls, was perfect. But here, the camera moves slowly, and enemies or even obstacles such as walls can often obstruct your view, causing extra harm to our heroic ninja. When you do get it to where you want it to be, since the action is so fast, things might have rotated enough so that the view might need to be adjusted again. There is also some platforming to be done. I've already said this. Normally, this is to be expected in an action game like Ninja Gaiden Sigma, and I'd be fine with it, but there's obviously some problems, otherwise I won't be ranting about it. Ryu moves way too fast, but then again, he's supposed to be running fast. He's a freaking ninja, but this doesn't translate well to precise jumping. There were 3 areas that I can recall that gave me problems upon reaching them, and all I had to do was attempt to jump from area to area. 1. The crypts. 2. A warehouse. And 3. This garden area thing. I skipped the garden area since it seemed optional. The crypts weren't terrible, but I kept missing jumps or performed wall runs that ended just short of the intended destination. But the warehouse? F that. I'm not kidding when it took me over 30 minutes or so to get past it. Sure, some of that was trying to reach the golden scarab over here, which, when turned into the shopkeeper of the game, gives you some bonuses, like more weapons or items that increase your maximum life or spirit power. Even when I decided to give the middle finger to this scarab, I still had trouble. Ryu's leaps are so fast and cannot be adjusted once you are in midair. Don't hit the platform flush and you'll fall off, and it took a good 30 to 45 seconds to run back up a few flights of stairs up to the second level where you have to start the platforming. I almost quit here, and I am not joking about this. Piggybacking off the camera woes, the controls could be improved a bit. They aren't awful, mind you, but there are some pain points that got me a bit irritated, especially when enemies were fast and I couldn't get a lock on them. Some of the best moves, like the Flying Sparrow Slash, require you to push forward on the analog stick before slashing your sword. This move is awesome, as it does hefty damage, zooms into the enemy like Sonic's homing spin attack, and often beheads the enemy. Yet, there's a problem. If the camera is moving around, the game might think that you're trying to do a simple jumping heavy slash instead of this Flying Sparrow move. This can especially be critical against bosses where you need to have perfect timing in order to hit the weak spots or even simply strike an enemy, as many of them will move erratically around the battlefield. Plus, depending on the weapon you're using, if you fail to use the technique that you were gunning for and instead simply do that heavy slash, well, that opens you up to some easy counterattacks from your opponents. Maybe if there was a way to target specific enemies it wouldn't be so bad, but there isn't. In fact, there were times where I was holding left stick in the direction I intended to attack, yet Ryu still swiped his blade in a different direction because an enemy might have been closer. The game If I wanted to attack the guy behind me, I would have freaking aimed at that guy, not the one I was going for. In addition to this, why the hell was the same button used for your weaker slash in interaction with objects, such as chests and doors? Seriously, I hate this in every freaking game that includes it. You'll be slashing away at a threat, get a bit close to a door as you evade enemy attacks, and before you know it, you're leaving that area to go to a different one. And when you go back to where you were fighting, you aren't just stuck with that lone enemy that was left over. Hell no! You get to fight the entire enemy wave again. If you're at low health, I hope you have healing items, because otherwise, you're freaking screwed, aren't you? You might be thinking, why not just use the heavy attacks when close to doors? And sure, that's a valid point. But they are much slower, and if you miss, again, you're just opening yourself up wide for a counterattack, which could possibly lead to death. Of which goes to my next point. Death happens frequently, and there are no real checkpoints. If you didn't save your game recently, you're gonna have some problems. Best of all, you cannot save in between chapters. Instead, you have to seek out a save point. Granted, most stages have one within the first room or two of the stage, but there are times where you finish the prior chapter against the boss, and after you load the next chapter, you are stuck in a frantic battle against cheap enemies while you panic and look for a save point to save your ass for at least a few minutes. And sometimes, you'll be stuck fighting a lot of tough enemies before the boss that has been destroying you, and it's no guarantee that you'll reach the boss area with a lot of health remaining. Enemies themselves are sometimes infuriatingly cheap with their attacks. Not only do they evade attacks that seemingly strike them, but they will block strikes when they don't look to be having a defensive animation. In addition, most of them have grapple attacks that do some ridiculous damage, and best of all, they're unblockable. That's right, if you cannot do a backflip to get out of a mutant's clawed grasp, you are taking damage, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. Even better, you can even go from one grapple to another, making your ninja get tossed around like a freaking crash test dummy. You might get stuck in these attacks and have to start spamming healing potions just to give yourself a chance to survive. Ah, stun locks. Those exist too. It's normally due to you not being able to be aware of what's happening in the area you're in, such as the enemy covering the camera enough so that a different enemy is taking easy swipes at you. But you can get stuck in a corner and then blasted mercilessly until you are dead. Bosses love doing this, along with those damnable unescapable grapples. Alma is the worst, and no, there's no relation to the Alma from Fear that I know of. Alma in Ninja Gaiden lore is the sister of the other playable character, Rachel, a fiend hunter. Alma got corrupted somehow, and now she's a freaking hulking goddess that you have to fight twice. In the first one, she simply floats around, chucking chunks of pillars and deadly magical spheres at you. She also seems to evade you every time you strike, but if you get close, she might suck you up in some sort of vacuum and throw you around a bit. And once you hit the ground, maybe she'll bat you around a bit more. This was ultimately the point in which my raging really started to get real. My blood started to boil. This boss battle made me question whether I had an anger problem or not. Never before had I yelled at the TV screen as violently as I had for this game. Oh, but it doesn't end there now, does it? Near the end of the game, you run into some sort of labyrinth, and in there, what do you find but mystical ghost fish? Those are kind of weird enemies to fight, and they seem to respawn, and move quickly, and swarm you, and force you to mash buttons to get them off, only for others to come at you, bro! This was my final breaking point, yet I pushed through, beat Alma version 2 and another boss to get to the next stage, where there were more of these effing fish before you can even reach the save point. Thank God the game is at least willing to start you off with maximum health between stages, but still, this is just insane! Yet I still made it to this door, where I was told that I apparently missed a few of the deity statues that I had been collecting. It was at this point in which I shut off the PS3, ejected the disc, placed it in the case, and threw it on the bookshelf, never to be touched again. I know I was only a level or two away from the finish, but I didn't care anymore. I didn't know I was even supposed to be collecting these statues. This was just too much bullshittery for me to handle. And although they only do minor damage, you fight soldiers that carry guns. Even if you are blocking, these bullets will still do slight damage. But if you deflect too many bullets, your defensive stance will still waver, allowing enemies to get into more powerful melee strikes, or even worse, grapples. Things get even worse when you reach the enemies that carry frickin' machine guns and even rocket launchers. Okay, I know. you fight these types of enemies in Ninja Gaiden games on NES. But those games were fun! You could destroy the bullets and missiles, or simply evade them since the game gives you a chance to jump over or duck under them. Not here. Bullets fly at realistic speeds, and rockets, although dodgeable, still contain splash damage that you need to worry about. If you are up against these types of enemies and you have no healings left, you are royally screwed! In fact, any time you run out of healing potions, you're practically done for. Sure, the shopkeeper sells them, but they aren't cheap. And you might be saving the essence currency thing for other items, like the bracelet that increases defensive power. Not like I've noticed any benefit with that though, I still died just as easily. Now, the game does taunt you a bit if you die 3 times consecutively. You will be asked if you want to abandon the way of the ninja. Hit yes and the game will ask you if you are sure, and then it will ask one more time. Succumb to these 3 prompts, and Ayane will appear, mocking you by saying that she had more faith in you and that she's disappointed. However, the difficulty will then be dropped to Ninja Dog, which is not selectable at the beginning of the game. Enemies supposedly do less damage and will die quicker, but I didn't notice much of a difference. What I did notice, however, is that she will also give you healing items every few deaths. In addition, all the prices at the shopkeeper have been decreased, so those healing items are a bit more affordable now. The game is still far from a cakewalk, though, so don't let your guard down. And I really tried not to lower myself to that level. I really did. I made it to this battle against 2 dickworms that fire electricity or fire at you. It's not so bad, but when they slam themselves down the ground and sweep the floor, it's surprisingly hard to evade it. I'm thinking I'm clearing the jump, but the game tells me I'm dead wrong. And the window to attack is narrow. Best of all, guess what? They have an attack where they scoop Ryu into their mouth and chomp down for a bit. This is where I gave up and became a dog. Alright. Okay. Deep breath. I'm done ranting and raging about the real problems with the game. But I'm not done with the review. Even with all of these challenges, the game has the potential to be fun. The opening environments in Ryu's town and in the mountain villa are gorgeous. Ignoring all the crap I just ranted about, the gameplay is for the most part smooth. The combat starts out as being fun. There's plenty of blood splatters that linger for a while on the floors and walls. The story is decent, with Ryu taking his revenge against Doku. But once you get about halfway through the game, emerging through the crypts, you'll be encountering the same old enemies and environments. Running through the Empire of Vigor is fun at first, but there's not a lot to see, and the second time around, nothing really changes. Bosses and areas start to get recycled, leading to a blander experience. The military base has you in a generic industrial complex, and you fight not 1, but 2 tanks and a helicopter. And these battles are just stupid. Dodge turret fire, jump and fire an explosive or anti-tank arrow from conveniently placed containers. The helicopter is even worse than the tanks, as the rockets it fires are nearly impossible to avoid. And then you have enemies that take far too many hits, such as the undead roaming around the crypts or the dino mutant creature things. The game just loses its luster. I could have dealt with all of those camera and control complaints I talked about, but the game just stopped being fun for me once I reached this point of the game. And again, once I hit this point, where the game told me I was missing items, of which, again, I didn't even know I was searching for them, I called it quits. One last thing of note before I wrap this up. I feel like the developers were a bit proud of what they did with the female anatomy. We all know what I'm getting at here. Do I need to spell it out? Fine. Jiggling boobs. I'm fine with stuff like this in moderation, but the game enjoys panning the camera over breasts at every chance it gets, almost like they are bragging what they were able to do. Does it detract from the game? Hell no. But it did make me laugh a few times when the game went out of its way to draw attention to boobs. Ninja Gaiden Sigma was a very difficult game for me to rate. Fundamentally, it's not a terrible game, just really frustrating in areas that I feel should have more polish. Again, I've played Demon/Dark Souls styles of games where I die a lot, yet progression felt rewarding. If I was to compare Ninja Gaiden Sigma to even Devil May Cry, sure, there were frustrating moments in that too, but it didn't feel nearly as cheap as Ninja Gaiden. Even the original NES games had their ways to get past those areas that felt impossible. So no, Ninja Gaiden Sigma isn't bad. It's just not for me. In order to rate the game, I tried to eliminate all my personal gripes, anger, and frustration, and be fair, as I did enjoy myself at times. If you want to give it a go, just be prepared with some very unpolished areas. Personally, I'll be sticking with the NES games. Final score? 5 out of 7. This is Reaper. Happy fragging.